If you're a fan of the Spector Creative channel, you know that I often talk about my favorite historical time, ancient Egypt. Well, what can I say? I visited it after college. I thought it was an awesome place. It felt like walking through history, and it was one of the coolest summers I've honestly ever got to spend. I went with my two best friends from high school and college, and we did all the typical things that tourists do when they visit Egypt. Make a mockery of everything because we were in our mid 20s, like running around and pretending we were finding ancient Egyptian artifacts that we needed to steal because they belonged in a museum, because, that's where you're supposed to put them. Or, making those human sacrifices that have to be done in order to call upon the wrath of the gods. But I think the one feature that really excited me about spending time in Egypt were the hieroglyphs. It was just this amazing language, and soon after leaving, I decided, well, I want to learn how to actually read, this. And in fact, I run a program on this YouTube channel called Doodling with Purpose every Sunday morning if you want to learn hieroglyphs with me. So check that out. All right, shameless plugs aside, one of the interesting things about Egypt and pop culture is how often both movies and, well, toys and product tend to get Egypt wrong. For example, the new Death on the Nile movie, which is adapting one of my favorite Agatha Christie stories, has a great shot where they go past the pyramids sailing along. Well, if you notice on any map of Egypt, you can't exactly sail past the pyramids because the Nile River does not come anywhere close to it, despite the fact that every movie tends to show it that. I mean, come on, look, you can see right here. Where's the Nile? It's way, way in the background there. It's not anywhere close. You do not sail past the pyramids the way they always tend to do in every movie, or like in the original Mummy movie from '99, the way, you can always see the pyramids everywhere you were. It's like, being in Paris, you can always see the Eiffel Tower. Not like that. They're way out there. All right. So looking at toys and how they adapt ancient Egypt, I've always been a fan of this. And one of the things that really excites me is when they use hieroglyphs in the actual toys, like this cool Playmobil set they did of the Great Pyramid at Giza, or Fantasy Pyramid. And there are several pieces that have hieroglyphs. Unfortunately, though, they're pretty much just gibberish. They're just designs and things to make it, look ancient Egyptian. Same thing with the King Sphinx figure from Power Rangers. I picked up the Lightning Collection figure. I don't own any other Power Ranger figures. This is my very first. But, he had hieroglyphs actually on the figure, so I thought that was pretty cool. Got it home, took a look at it, tried to translate it, nothing. All right, so that brings me to Moon Knight, the latest Egyptian-based superhero to jump into the scene. Well, I shouldn't say latest. I mean, he's been around for, decades. And I was a fan of him when I was a kid, not just because his real name, or, one of his personalities is Mark Spector. Gee, where do you think I got that from? But he was, he when I was in the comics in the 90s, he definitely spent, he had a lot of, I guess you could say, panel time. One of my favorite Moon Knight stories was actually from Spider-Man. Ran an Amazing Spider-Man called the Round Robin, the Sidekick's Revenge, where Moon Knight's old sidekick, well, gee, what a shock, in a story called The Sidekick's Revenge, takes revenge on him. And this story had a whole bunch of characters crossing over. Mostly I got into it because of Spider-Man and Darkhawk, but Moon Knight, because it was his sidekick, wound up playing a very large role, and this was kind of one of my first introductions to the character. I definitely grew to really like him, especially the connection to ancient Egypt, since that was a passion of mine. And when the show came out, I was really excited, especially to see how they were going to do the costume. And I love the way they incorporated, things like mummy-type motifs, and there's even hieroglyphics, both on the show, like when he opens up one of the tombs, spoiler alert for episode 4, as well as actually on his costume. You don't really get a good view of it in the show because, well, one, he doesn't wear the suit that much, and like, any superhero show or movie where they tend to spend more time in their civilian identity, it's one of my pet peeves, but that's a whole other YouTube video. But there are some PR shots that were put out. And using these PR shots and sort of zooming in, you can see that, yes, there are hieroglyphics that run up and down on his skirt, I guess you could say, or his tunic, or his legs. Yeah, I guess they're right on his legs, because luckily we have action figures of this series, and these give us an even better view of the hieroglyphs. It's one of the really cool things about an action figure is it lets us explore the outfit or the costume for a character, from any angle, not just limited to what you see on camera. So looking at close-ups of Moon Knight's action figure, you can definitely very clearly see the glyphs, and I realized on looking at them, there's clearly 4 lines, 2 inner lines, like inner thigh, and 2 outer leg, and I compared them against the shot from the PR poster, because you really can't see it actually in the show, and while there's some matchups, it's not completely the same. All right, so before jumping into what it looks like this says, a couple quick backgrounds on hieroglyphs for those of you who have not been following the Doodling with Purpose series every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. I think we're up to episode 120. So very, very top-line ground rules about hieroglyphics. They represent phonetic sounds like B, D, G, H, but they can also be ideograms and represent what they physically are, such as the case of the moon glyph. There's also no vowels in hieroglyphs, and hieroglyphs can be written in several different ways, up and down, left and right, based on the position of any animal. That's how you know how to read it. You read into the animal's face. So if there's an animal, like here, you have several owls and a human looking to the left. So you're going to read into the left, if you will. So what I've done here is I've written down the glyphs from the right leg, so I could easily, or at least have a better chance of translating it, since the PR shot makes it a little difficult because of the wrinkles and you can't see a straight line of all of the glyphs. But the figure shot, because the advantage of an action figure is we control it, we can look at the leg in detail. So I was able to use the figure to get a more accurate representation of what the glyph said by writing them out. You can see the folds in the fabric in the PR shot hide certain glyphs, so you're not getting a straight read. And hieroglyphs can be read up and down, so you start at the top and you read down if it's written as a column. So I tended to see the PR shot as secondary, and I kind of just used it as a backup. I did notice that when comparing the PR shot to the action figure, so I wrote out both versions here, that there are some similarities, and you could see that they're clearly based on the same source material. I think it really came down to the wrinkles in the PR shot, or the wrinkles in the costume, and the fact that Hasbro is a little limited on what they can print that small. So I noticed some of the glyphs were kind of simplified, but if you look here on the bottom row, you can see owl, placenta, house plan, that's what those are. They repeat on both the figure and the PR shot. So we're definitely looking at the same level of glyph. I know I'm a nerd. I really analyze this. All right, then the other leg, the left leg, is also a little different. But again, you can see similarities between the figure and the PR shot. But there are some weird differences, and that kind of goes into whether or not this is an actual sentence or, like Play School or King Sphinx, just random jibber jabber. So, or random things to look like hieroglyphs, or just put them. It's like taking English letters and just putting them in random order. Now, I mentioned earlier how you know how to read hieroglyphs by reading into an animal's face. So, like that owl at the top that's looking left, or the feet that are walking left. That's how you know you're going to read left to right.
Okay, I think I figured this thing out. You can go up and down, but not side to side or back in time.
So what I wanted to, though, draw attention to is while you're reading left to right here, or really up and down, some of the glyphs are actually written backwards, which you would never see. So, as an example, you see the walking feet here. At the top, they're walking to the left, and the bottom, they're walking to the right. You would never actually see that. They should be walking in the same direction. So we'll see how that plays out, but that kind of gave me pause, wondering whether or not, again, this is jibber jabber, or if it's an actual sentence. So here I've written out both legs, the inner thigh and then the outer thigh, if you will. And again, looking at both the figure and the PR shot, I'm definitely going to go with the figure as the source material, because the PR shot is just kind of, I'm using that as a checkoff, if you will, just a sniff test. So looking at the inner leg, they're the same thing on the left and the right. They repeat. It's the same sentence, looks slightly different, but I think that's just from Hasbro's limitations. For example, the second glyph on the left leg is a vulture, and the second one on the right leg is the owl. All right, so when translating hieroglyphs, the first thing we do is transliterate it by writing the sounds, and some glyphs are trilateral, bilateral, or single. So here we really only have single and bilateral sounds. You'll notice that the placenta, the circle with the three lines, it's an H, but it has that little happy face under it, which means it's actually a K sound, not a H. That's what that little half moon under the H means. The first word, myrrh, which is it's a garden hoe, is what you're drawing, is the word for love. And the second word, the best I could figure out is, I believe it's the word to be clad in, or rather the verb. So you've got the rabbit, wa, followed by h, and the water sign n. Then on the second line, what the first glyph, which is bone marrow, is actually a common phrase. It's translated as the venerated one. This single glyph shows up quite a lot. If you were going to translate it more to English, it might be something like blessed be he, if you will, if you're thinking in terms of, the way religious texts are often written. All right, so we have for the love, to be clad in, the venerated one. The owl is a pronoun, a preposition, excuse me. It's a preposition. It could be with, of, from, or in. And you basically use context to figure that out. Now, this last word would be pronounced phonetically k. So you've got k, the KH. Then you will have the hut, the H. And then it looks like you have maybe the box, which is SH. So it looks like it could be Khonshu, but it's missing the letter U in order to be Khonshu. A U would be a chick here, so I've written that in. So if there was a chick here, this could be considered the word Khonshu, although it is not the traditional spelling. There is a traditional spelling of Khonshu. Again, for those who maybe haven't been up on the show, Khonshu is the Egyptian deity of the moon and justice, and he's the one who makes, in the show, Moon Knight is his avatar, basically his human form that can go and punish the guilty or, stop crime, if you will, and et cetera, et cetera. So while Khonshu is represented in a lot of different ways in the show and in the comic, in Egyptian, he does have the head of a bird, but it's not really a raven. Here you see someone who loves Khonshu. They've tattooed his name and image on their arm. And this is the traditional hieroglyph spelling, where you have the placenta, water sign, the sprout of the papyrus, the chick, and then that last sign means a god. It's a sitting pharaoh or a sitting god. It's a determinative, which tells you what type of word. So you're looking at the name of a god. That's what that last one says. So that's your traditional spelling of Khonshu. That last word could be Khonshu if there was a chick added, which would make the whole thing to be clad in the love of Khonshu, blessed be he. And that's why I think it's the word Khonshu, because it makes sense within the context if we were going to translate this into sort of English. All right. And if that's what one leg says on the inner thigh, that's also what the other leg does, even though it looks like some of the vulture and the owl got swapped. But again, that might just be a Hasbro thing, not being able to accurately show what the glyphs say. All right, so we've got the inner leg. What about the outer leg? So here, both legs have completely different glyphs running on the outside. So again, we're going to read into the names, but we are going up and down. The first word there at the top that looks like sort of three baskets or three different type of vases. So this is actually a full phrase. These aren't individual glyphs. When you see these together, it means either at the end of the world or in the name of. Both of these are phrases that kind of work and could probably definitely be part of what's trying to be said. The next letter, which looks like a diamond on the Hasbro figure, I think this is supposed to be the open mouth, which is an R, which is a little bit more squashed. For example, if you look here, the third to last glyph, that box with the little box in the corner right there, that Hasbro printed on the leg, the square, that's supposed to be this. I can tell from basically comparing it to the PR shot. But Hasbro obviously doesn't have the ability to print exactly like this, which is why they made it look more like a square. That's why I think that that fourth glyph, which looks like a diamond on the figure, is actually a mouth, which is what I drew under it in purple there. And if it's the mouth, which is the R sound, then this could be the word more than or so that. The next word, the best I could do was looking at to hear the king. It's a little hard to tell because I can't really tell what all these glyphs are. And then that bottom word is some type of verb meaning movement. So that's what it means when you have the walking legs at the end of a word. It means it's a verb meaning movement, like to go, to run, to walk. It could mean any of those things. I can't tell what the glyphs are. My best bet is as at the end of the world, so that something something can hear the king go. I know that's a little loosey-goosey, but it's because, again, I can't really tell what the glyphs say. We would have to get like a really good high-res image of the actual costume. And then looking at the other inside leg, the right leg, which is also unique. Again, so the outside legs don't repeat the way the inside legs. So first I've put the sound for all of the letters, and now translating them. The first one we have a determinative, which is also of a man, of a person sitting, and this is also the word I, or me, or my. Then we have the M again, the owl, which, as I noted, what is a preposition for in, with, as, or from. Context will tell us what it means. So the next one we have the moon, and the moon is not a sound glyph, it's an ideogram. So when you have the moon, it actually means the moon. There's no articles in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs either. There's no the, a, or an, so you have to add that to it in order to bring it into English. Then we have the verb to serve, followed by what I believe is the word power. So all of this actually does kind of flow together. It now really means, are we reading the left leg first or the right leg first? And like, what is the order that we're supposed to read each column? Honestly, the sentence actually makes sense read in both directions. So it's hard to tell, but either way, looks like the full translation comes down to be clad in the love of Khonshu, blessed be he, or the revered one, Khonshu, is what it literally says. But again, you have to take Egyptian and sort of bring it into modern English to understand what they mean by the veneered one. That just is, much like in different religions, you say like, honored, blessed be he. All right, and then I behold the moon to serve power something something, because that last glyph, the one I circled in green there on the left, that's a Greek letter. That's not a hieroglyph. So I don't know what that is, if that's just Hasbro, the best way they can do it. Now the other thing I did was try flipping them around, because again, do you read the left leg first or the right leg first? Because there's no correct way in Egyptian. And if we do that, then we get, as at the end of the world, so that something can hear the king, I behold the moon to serve power something something. So maybe that M at the end there, that is a Greek letter. Maybe that's supposed to be something about Khonshu. It might be the combination of two glyphs that Hasbro squished together because they couldn't print that small. I'm not sure. But definitely the inner leg is the clearest, and that's the one that repeats. So my best guess as a junior Egyptologist, to be clad in the love of Khonshu, blessed be he. So it definitely says that on both inner thighs. So hey, they're clearly going for something. It's not gibberish, which is the great thing. I am not the world's greatest Egyptologist. I'm only the world's 9th greatest Egyptologist. So you might want to get one of the guys better than me. But I think, we did a pretty good job. And if you're interested in learning more about hieroglyphs and you want to take your own shot at translating more glyphs that will pop up in the show, whether on the costume or in the props or on the set, well, you can join me every Sunday morning for Doodling with Purpose, where we go week by week, 10-minute lessons learning the hieroglyphic alphabet. And if it's ever something you've been curious to learn about, we make it super easy by just doing it slowly over time. Heck, ancient Egyptian scribes spent 9 years learning it before they were allowed to do it professionally. So join us Sunday mornings, or come back anytime on Spector Creative, and let me know what you think. Were mysteries of Moon Knight uncovered? Did knowing what it says on his costume add to your enjoyment of the show? At least it's cool to know that they did put something there, and it's not just, for show. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the comment section. Be sure to share this video. It's the best way to help support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.